Do we have action? Yay! Thank you all. Thank you everybody for coming out today to Coffee and Comics. The only place in the building in our beautiful city of Reno, Nevada that has a pow and a bang on the building and everybody still looks calm. Yeah. Well, I'm Adrienne Feemster. I'm the third vice president of our local Reno Sparks NAACP. I am also the vice chair of the Black Caucus of the Democratic Party of Washoe County. Yay! I'm so honored to be here, and I'm excited for the presentation we have to come. First, I want to open the floor with a land acknowledgement because it is our responsibility to honor the indigenous people of the Great Basin. In the south, we honor the Southern Paiutes by their name, the Nuwuvi. In the north, from Pyramid Lake to the Mojave Desert, the Numu, the Northern Paiutes, take pride with the pupfish, trout, and the kuiwi. Yes. Extending from Death Valley to the Ruby Mountains and beyond, from Death Valley to the Ruby Mountains and beyond, are the ancestral lands of the Western Shoshone and the Goshutes. Throughout the high desert to the alpine areas of Tahoe, the Wasiwi stories center around the beautiful lake. All indigenous people have place names that were trade routes and areas dedicated for gathering, hunting, and healing. Indigenous peoples continue to have access to honor songs and prayers that bring a balance and indebtedness to protecting the land's wildlife and waters against sickness. We honor indigenous teachings and continued protection we seek for Earth Mother. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge that I am a board member with Northern Nevada Marches Forward. And because of the board members, we have these wonderful events. They work tirelessly to support and uplift the voices and empower the diverse people of our communities and their communities to create transformative change in our social settings. Thanks to the dedication of the organization's officers and board members who organized this amazing event, and also other popular events like the Reno Women's March, the Education and Action Series, which is what this is, but in person. This is actually one of our first, if I'm right, in-person Education and Action Series since the shutdown of COVID-19 and in the pandemic. So we're excited to be back in flesh and action again. Please, if you don't know about these events, visit our website at northernnevadamarchesforward.com. And there at the top, you'll see a link for Education and Action Series. And before we bring our special guest up, I want to extend a special note of appreciation to our former chair, Jackie Shelton. She wasn't expecting this. But she is amazing. She was able to put this very, very important event together. Choosing Anti-Racist Path. Our guest is a member of the Yurok tribe from the village of Watepec on the Klamath River, a graduate of University of Nevada, Reno, a leader in helping educators create classrooms that will allow children to thrive and have access to liberative knowledge. She has recently retired from Birmingham Young University, where she was a professor of teacher education and global women's studies. She is currently working on a film about Yurok fire and land stewardship practices. She has served on the founding board of PFLAG of Provo, Utah County. That's a national organization that unites LGBTQIA+ individuals with families, friends, and allies, and is currently serving as the past president of the ACLU of Utah. Yeah, union, yes. Her experience as a queer Yurok woman has influenced her work as a teacher, as a scholar, as an artist, as an activist. Our very special guest will share some history about racism, how we can work together toward a more welcoming and inclusive society for everyone, regardless of race, faith, and gender, how we can make meaningful change by recognizing systemic racism in our society and institutions. which we will enable all of us to contribute to the process of dismantling it. So now, please check your phones, make sure they are on silent for this time.
Thank you.
And allow your mind to be open and your spirit to be available. And please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Roni Jo Draper.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this off and pretend that I'm a stand-up comic or something. That'll be fun for the evening. Thank you. I always say that I just like to do public speaking to hear my introductions. You all make me sound real good, and so I appreciate that. I will also invite you to invite all of us to think about our intentions. I'm not generally a public speaker as much as I'm an educator. I'm a teacher. And teaching is about being in relationship with your students. I don't know a lot of you here, and you only know me from maybe that brief, wonderful introduction. And so this becomes a little bit of a challenge to have this as a pedagogical space when we don't really know each other that well. But I am going to invite you to set your intentions for what you want to bring to this conversation, how you want to participate here with me. I invite you to bring your curiosity to the front of your brain or heart or wherever your curiosity kind of likes to be. And put your skepticism, like I don't want you to throw that away, but just put it in your pocket for a minute. And I'd also ask you to take your fear and put that someplace, maybe in a different pocket, and just create for yourself, create for us here, a space of love and curiosity. So if we could do that, that'd be great. And then I'm going to talk about some not funny things, anti-racism. That's not funny, but I'm going to try to make it fun, if not funny. I want to begin by talking about this notion, but because I think that we, as Americans, we're not good at this. We like this like rugged individualism. You know, we like that foam finger. We're number one. We're number one. We like to be the top. We like to be number one. It's always often about just us. But I want us to think about what does it mean to repent or atone or get right as a group, as a community. And I'm going to fall back on my understanding of how Yurok people deal with getting things right. So the way that we understand it in our Yurok cosmology, don't correct me if I'm wrong, Dad. Just hang. Just chill out. The way that we consider it is that the Creator created the world, created animals, created land, all the things, and everything was just like going along. It was all copacetic, and then humans came, and you know how we are, and things got a little out of balance. It's got a little off kilter. And so what Yurok people do, along with the neighboring tribes, even though they don't speak the same languages, they would get together every year, every other year or so, and have a world renewal ceremony. And the idea is that the world has become unbalanced, and we need to get it back in balance. And the dancing is about getting it back in balance. And it's not even like a metaphorical notion. It's like literally we have to dance so hard. So you can sort of imagine an unbalanced world and if I just dance hard enough, I'm not going to move here because I could go right through this thing. But we can dance hard enough to get the world back in balance. And that we have to do it as a group because we got it out of balance as a group. And so I really appreciate this notion of this kind of ceremony because I think sometimes we think about our work in the world as very individual. You know, we check our own hearts, and I think that happens with racism or white supremacy or whatever. That we think we have the experience of checking our own hearts. We get in there, we look around, we're like, awesome. I'm totally not racist. I was afraid I was going to be, but I'm not. And so, and then we just are like, whew, that's freeing. I can just go back about my business now. And yet, racism marches on. And it's what Eduardo Bonavia Silva describes as racism without racists. I know.
Impossible.
People felt that one. And part of how this happens is, I know, sit on the edge of your seat for this. White supremacy is just baked into our institutions. But we have founding documents in the US. I'm sure that you've heard this before. Some of you have even read these documents that describe Native Americans as merciless Indian savages. And that's just like right there in the Declaration of Independence, right? So we're just baking the white supremacy in there. We have a whole constitution that said, enslave people from the continent of Africa. We'll count you as 3/5 of a whole human. Someone sat down and did the math and said, white guy equals 1, black man 3/5. Just wrote it out there. Just Thomas Jefferson, just like, yeah, I think that seems right. And it just went and questioned for hundreds of years. And so all of our institutions are like that. And we don't want to think that because we've checked our hearts and we're good. But these institutions. And so that we have institutions like our schools, our hospitals, our banks, our places of business, our prison system. Racism, built into the institution. And we did that as a collective. And so we're not going to be able to undo that as an individual with a clean, pure heart. We're going to have to undo it also as a collective. We need to get dancing. Now I'm being figurative. But you all knew that because I could see a single one of you just get up and start dancing. So we need to work together. One of the things that having the institutions take on white supremacy is, now I have a minor in physics from the University of Nevada, Reno. Hardly ever get to use it, but I'm going to use it today. I'm going to use the word momentum and inertia. I know. Take it in. So white supremacy in these institutions just has a lot of momentum. It's just like a lot of inertia. It is just moving. And if one person steps in front of it to try to stop it, they just get rolled over. It doesn't work. And so we have to work together because white supremacy is organized. You know what I'm talking about? Like those moms that are showing up at school board meetings right now. and telling people they shouldn't read Toni Morrison. They're organized. Non-racists, the pure of heart, are not that organized. Right? You know, we're just sitting around going, you know what? I didn't call anyone the N-word today, so I think I've contributed. But they're still taking Toni Morrison off the shelves. They're still saying that we're not going to talk about the genocide of indigenous peoples in North America. We're not going to talk about children's bodies being found at sites of Indian boarding schools. We're going to mention the Tulsa race riots. We're not going to bring that up. And so white supremacy continues to work its way through our systems. It's just the algorithm, right? And even we know that when good people with good hearts try to create an actual algorithm, Google, to sort through resumes for people with jobs, the algorithms put the white men at the top.
That's right.
White women, black men, black women. It's just built into the algorithm. We can't seem to pull ourselves out of it. So far, this has been a real upper of a cock. But I do believe, and I think it's because I work with so many young people, and so if you want to have hope, work with young people. And but I believe that we can make changes, but we have to decide to do so. Ron DeSantis has been on my mind a lot lately.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But not in a good way. And I hear him, you know, we think about like one individual not having that much power. And Ron DeSantis as an individual doesn't have that much power. He has just as much power as you or me. But there are people who are empowering him, right?
Yep.
And so apparently to get reelected as the governor of Florida, he can say, well, we need to, Florida's where the woke mob comes to die. Like I'm trying to imagine the woke mob going on vacation to Florida and this being a bad scene for them. But for me, I'm not interested in understanding, is Ron DeSantis racist or not racist? It's not an interesting question for me. What is interesting is, are the policies that he's putting in place, that the voters in Florida are allowing to be put in place, that state legislators, school boards putting in place, how is that going to harm Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, other peoples of color who reside in Florida? That's the more important question. And so one of the things I get frustrated by is sometimes when I hang around with good people, then we like to make a list of like who's racist, who's not racist. You play that game too? Am I the only one?
No.
It's a fun game. And again, it feels kind of okay to do, but then you're not really doing anything. Like categorizing the people is actually a white supremacist move all by itself. Right? Because the white supremacist movement is the one that came up with categories for humans in the first place. And so that we find ourselves, because we're all bathed in that white supremacy, just doing white supremacist stuff as well. And it really bums me out. It bums me out when I notice myself doing that, you know? And I think, oh, I should really know better. Right, I should know better. And then I find myself doing it. So then what we have to do is we have to decide to be anti-racist. Being a non-racist isn't good enough. because there's no motion there, and we've got all this inertia from white supremacy. So we need to have a force in an equal opposite direction, if I can, borrow the words of Newton, to combat it. I mean, if we imagine white supremacy as that big snowball that we see like in olden-timey cartoons with like just the mittens hanging out and stuff.
Yes.
Just rolling down the hill and taking up more people as it goes down. We have to imagine what kind of force would it take to stop that? And what kind of collective energy and efforts would that take? It's going to take doing some really hard things. Like when a new housing project for low-income families wants to go up in your neighborhood, you have to champion it. You have to say, yeah, it turns out humans get to live in all the places, not just in certain pockets. It's just some neighborhoods. That you have to be able to say, I want all these books in our school library. Bring them in. It means I want my kids to go to school with all the other kids. It means checking what we're doing at our southern border. Because we notice we're not putting a fence up near Canada. But we're real happy to stop people at the southern border, and we just really have no problem separating families and putting children in a separate place away from their parents and behind chain link fences with that one like foil blanket. We have to get serious and say, we're not about that life. We're not about that for people who are on our shores. But that's hard. That feels pinchy. And it feels like, it feels like that might affect me somehow. We know that the spate of bans on abortion are awful. It's got white women thinking. But we also know that the most vulnerable people under these bans are not white women. They're black and brown women who may not have the resources to go to another state or access even the health care they need in order to prevent a pregnancy. So we have to be aware, and this is hard because white supremacy doesn't come out and with like a name tag. It says, "Hi, I'm white supremacy. I'm here to take books away from your children," or "I'm here to ensure that black women who have babies also really super risk their lives in the hospital because no one really wants to listen to them say words like, I'm in pain, or this doesn't feel right." So it doesn't wear a name tag. But we have to be aware, and we have to ask the question that when we hear about new legislation, we hear about new policies, we hear about new practices, whether they're at our local school, our workplace, our church, our places where we recreate, that we have to ask ourselves, we have to be willing to ask the question, how will this affect people of color? What kind of effect will this have on the most vulnerable people in our communities? When I would teach my students, I would tell them, if you can make policies in your classrooms that make it possible for Black, trans, disabled children to be successful, everyone's going to be successful. Think of the most vulnerable person. And how are the policies going to affect that person? If it's going to be bad, then it's bad for everyone. And that's where we get an imbalanced world. And then we need to organize ourselves and then get in there and make things good. And say, no, we're not doing that. We're not having that policy. We're not going to support that legislation. Parents are calling schools every day. I'm going to talk about schools a lot because that's where my heart is. But parents call schools every day asking for things to be taken off shelves. Everybody in this room could make calls to schools asking for things to be put on the shelf. We could do that. And the schools will listen to parents, that they're listening to parents. But they're listening to the parents who are bothering them. And the nice, non-racist parents aren't picking up the phone. So, it's time to get our dance on. To dance, to walk, is about being in motion. And it's also about staying in motion. Because white supremacy isn't taking a break. And so we ought not to either. We have to also stay in motion. This isn't about, like, I just do this one thing, check, I've arrived. This is about a practice, a way of life, a way of being in the world that says, I'm going to dance so hard that I bring balance back, that I bring goodness back. And so let's see, where am I? See, I'm doing good on time. And so those are basically my remarks. But I also want to have a conversation with you all and hear, like, what do these words spark for you? Because I can see in your faces that people are thinking, things are happening in there. I want to hear what you're thinking about and how you respond to this idea of getting busy as an anti-racist.
One of the things we were talking about before your presentation was just the words that we use. That's a simple thing that we can change. I wonder if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so I was telling Jackie that I was text messaging with somebody. We were trying to set up a meeting, and then they said, "Well, do we want to have a powwow on that?" And I said, and I texted back and I said, "No, we do not want to have a powwow on that. We're not qualified to put on a powwow, but we can meet and chat." And so then the person was like, "Oh, that was probably wrong." Good eye. Way to go. I had this was a separate text conversation. I should maybe have more face-to-face conversations. But the person I was speaking with was a white guy, still is a white guy. And we're having this chit-chat, and then he's telling me, he's like, "Hey, I'm a learner. I want to set me straight if I mess up." Sure, that feels like a good hobby for me. I'm way into that. And then, like, 2 messages down, he sent the thumbs up emoji, but it was a black hand. I was like, oh, dang it. I gotta do this right now. So I said, okay, well, let's start with that emoji you just sent. Why is that hand black? And he goes, oh, it just when you press on it, it's like comes up with all the colors. And I was just like the first one, so I used it. Is that wrong? So if your hand's not black, it's wrong. I said, you have choices. Just pick one that matches your skin color or the Bart Simpson color.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You have those.
Yellow.
You have options, but you just have the 2. Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you for telling me. Anytime. I'm here for you. so I think what's tough, and so I'm being a little hard on my friend there, but what I think is tough is he genuinely didn't know, right? And then I'm in an awkward position of saying, okay, now do I disrupt our relationship to explain to him that I don't want to see that nonsense on my text feed? And we're in a position, right? And so part of what we have to understand is that there are lots of beautiful words in the world, and not all of us can get to use all of the words. Some of us get to use some words, and other people get to use other words. And what I think is tough is, and we were just talking about this, like it changes over time. Because that's how language works. The words take on new meanings, they take on new connotations, and we have to be willing to learn and understand and move with that. And we have to be willing to be corrected, and we have to be willing to be the people who do the correcting. I believe that I'm not the first person that got the black thumbs up. But I'm the first person who said something. I imagine that he was doing that with his white friends, and they were just like, Bart, send some thumbs up back to you or something. I don't know what. And so we have to be both diligent in understanding how language is changing and how we need to be aware of that. And then we have to figure out how we talk to one another in a way that says, oh, you probably didn't know that, but we don't do that anymore. We're not having a powwow. I'm not going to deal with your blackface on my texting. And so that we have to engage in those conversations in a way that that is uplifting and that beats white supremacy back. I feel like I didn't answer your question.
No, you totally did, and it's interesting because this just happened the other day. I was because we're not supposed to use master bedroom.
Right.
Primary
owner suite.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is really hard. It's a really hard word to give up because that's what
Yeah.
Right.
baked in. And this just came up, and I said, actually, we don't say master anymore. And they were like, oh my god, I never even thought of that.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times, if it's not aggressive, you can just have a conversation.
Right.
It's because you don't know. Like
Right. And for me, like to say, like, tell me why you're doing this. Like I didn't say, hey, you racist SOB. That's not how I started it. I said, like, help me understand what you're doing here. Like, oh, you don't know what you're doing is wrong. So let me tell you that. Right?
I want to ask you more about that momentum and inertia that's just rolling in this big, monstrous snowball that's going downhill, and how we stop that. So, looking at that aspect for people of color, you as a professional in the space, I want to ask you, when we talk about disrupting systemic or systematic processes that are contributing to these big, monstrous snowballs, how do we, because we talk about like our organization supporting people of color and communities and embracing them in places where they have power and can implement that power. But oftentimes we see only one or two which turn into tokens in these structures. And they're not really there to implement, they're there to be seen but not heard from. Or there to cooperate, like the pre-FIS was added for African Americans for the voting practice, but not really to be considered as any part human. If it weren't for that, they would have been still considered not human.
Right.
So today when we look at changing this system, it sounds like something we say, but we've been saying this for hundreds, at least since the civil rights movement, we've all been very aware of it. So how do we actually implement structural change, affect these biases in places where we see boards that are practicing implicit bias perhaps, and it doesn't matter to them because it doesn't affect their community, doesn't affect their families or their homes, but the decisions they're making are affecting Black and brown historically marginalized people? How do we actually penetrate that?
It is very, very difficult. And so I've been serving on the board of the ACLU of Utah for, this is my 7th year. And when I came onto the board, it was a primarily white board. And, you know, and I think that when you're in those spaces, it's easy if there's like just one or two people of color to just be like, keep my mouth shut till I find out like what the temperature is in here, right? We made concerted efforts to really diversify our board. But then we also carved out time in our board meetings to talk about race. We put it as an agenda item. And so that we could continue to be in these conversations. We also had a statement on our agendas that at the end of every meeting, we asked ourselves, at every decision that we make, how is that going to affect people of other races? Have we properly taken that into consideration? But we had to have new practices, right? We couldn't just say we're going to practice all the same way, but with brown people, right? One of the things I told an administrator at the university was, I get that you appreciate me being in a meeting, and you think, oh, we have an Indigenous person in our meeting. Like, that's all fine, but you don't want to hear the words I say. You want my body, but you don't want my experience, my knowledge, the thoughts that I have. And I don't need to be there just to take up space. And so that when we're looking, you know, just inviting different people to the table isn't dismantling anything, right? You just pull the chair out. But dismantling means that we're maybe going to have to change how the conversation goes. The other thing that happened on the board is we have a Latina lesbian. I don't want to play the stereotypes, but she's awesome. and sometimes she just gets pretty energetic in the way that she's saying her words. And so then a couple of the men, white men, wanted to have a meeting with me because I was the president to talk about this other person's behavior. And they said, are you going to talk to her about her tone? And I said, I am not going to talk to her about her tone. She's angry. She has good reason to be angry. She came by that anger honestly. And she turns the heat up for a few minutes in a board meeting, and now you're coming to me to tell me to take care of her. No, I'm happy to talk about your behavior. Somebody was a math teacher, huh? I'm happy to talk about you. You know, I'll talk about me. We'll talk about us. We're not going to talk about someone who's not here. And we're certainly not going to talk to her about her tone. I'm not your person for that. And so that we have to also change our expectations for how we're going to work together. That if we're going to invite these humans who are vital to our well-being into the meeting, we need to really welcome them in their wholeness, in their allness. And that's going to be uncomfortable sometimes. It's going to feel pinchy. It might get loud. People might start speaking in another language for a second. But it's going to be okay. And the person who needs to get okay with it is usually not the people of color in the room, because they're usually like grooving and jiving. Yes. And so that's what we have to figure that out. again, I feel like you ask a question, I say a lot of words, but maybe the question wasn't answered.
No, you're really spot on with a lot of what you're saying and what I've experienced. And a piece without going into more is, it gets complicated because with big systems, you now deal with the politics of it.
Right.
You deal with the social aspect, how that affects communities and people and lives and jobs and income.
Right.
And then you deal with the legalities of it.
Right.
Can you afford to legally press? Will they take your side? Now you have political. Now you have social. So there's just a lot involved with how dismantling this monster
Right.
when it comes to policy and laws.
Yes.
Right. Right.
And your example of the ACLU board, which is a board that you would hope would be one that would be welcoming to that change.
Sure.
And you're saying I had to wait till the right moment. So figuring out when that right moment is hopefully is easier in an ACLU board than it is in some other boards.
Sure.
And so
If you're on the board of the Eagle Forum, it's going to be rough.
So how do you intuit that point so that you can preserve the relationship and be the speaking role?
Well, part of what I have to do is think about who are my allies in the room.
Yes.
And I think that this is the other place where individuals, like everybody in here, I'm sure has done their little ally check, and we're like, totally down to ally. But then when it's in that moment, they're like peeps,
I know.
right? I just want to see a little mud get up on the allies. I want to see them risking relationships and not putting that always on people of color.
Yeah.
And so this work can't be done just by the people of color. This has to. It takes all of us working, like link some arms together, and work on it.
I just want to add, I worked for Planned Parenthood for 25 years. I tried to save Roe and I couldn't.
Well, you're only one person. Give yourself a little bit of a break.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. But the advocacy work is daily.
That's
Right.
And it's fucking hard
So
You
hard.
bet.
every day.
Mm-hmm.
And those of us who are comfortable need to be uncomfortable every day, especially those of us who are white, because we don't live like our brothers and sisters of color who are always uncomfortable every day, just trying to exist in white supremacy.
Right.
So you can't just do your little token, did my thing, whew, good, for a year. And you said something about in the beginning, the opposition is organized because they go to church. When I worked at Planned Parenthood, I thought I needed to start a church of choice.
Come to my church.
Well, start my own church because you need that constant reminder. We should come to something like this every week. Every Wednesday, or Sunday. Some of your churches may do this, some may not. Some of you may never walk into the church again. But it takes work
Right.
every
Every
day.
Right. Is there a particular kind of commitment? And people who are committed to white supremacy, they're committed in a lot of places in their lives. And so I think that your point about church and being constantly in it makes good sense. I think in was it 2020 when everybody was reading a book?
Mm-hmm.
I think we all read the same book. And then everybody was just like, put the book on the shelf and was like, I read a book. I'm good. And you're like, are you still reading books? You don't have to answer that. People are like, I'm not. I have TikTok now. So I know. And so we have to stay constantly aware, and do it like a kind of devotional study, right? So that we can stay up on changes of language, understanding like what policies are actually born of white supremacy. Professionalism. I think when anybody talks about professionalism, I'm like, my ears are up for white supremacy, right? And so, but how do you get educated so that you know what to even look for?
Hi.
Hi.
I do a lot of DEI work with my organization, and as a person of color myself, I try to bridge. I think there's a difference between being an ally and being an accomplice.
Yes, of
And I
course.
think we need to take those people that are willing to be allies and encourage them to become accomplices.
Right.
What are the best ways you think?
But I think it's the same thing as being non-racist to being anti-racist. It becomes with a different kind of force, right? And it really is like about people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and say, well, I'm going to take actual action. What I think is tough, and I thought about this, I drove here from Salt Lake today, so I had a lot of time to think about this talk.
Wow.
Some of you are like, you could have thought a little bit longer. But I knew that the question of like, so the nuts and bolts of it, what do I do? I'm just gonna lean hard on my indigeneity for this answer. You have to know your local environment. You have to have the relationship with your local people, with your local places. So I can't drop into a place and say, here's what you need to do here. Because you know your space, you know your people, you know your organizations, what is going to work for them, and be in relationship with that space. I think this is tough, and we're looking at DEI as like a place that someone's going to come, hold the mic, drop some solutions. That doesn't work, right? We understand that, I can grow corn in Iowa. I probably can't. People are like, oh, we've seen your houseplants. But I could grow corn in Iowa, but I could pick up those same seeds and then plant them here, and they don't work, right? And someone's like, that's bad corn. Well, I don't know. We've got soil, we've got weather conditions, we've got all kinds of different things that impinge on the local. And so that we need to get really into our local places. This is my sphere of influence. And so that's where I do the work. If that means doing the work with my family, teaching my kids how to not be assholes, that's hard.
Sorry I failed.
There's still time, Dad. And so that we work in those places, and it doesn't have to. It's grand and it's not grand. I'm not asking anybody here. We're not talking about let's all move to Florida. Everyone's like, no. I cannot go there with you. We're not. I don't need you to do that. I need you to stop the stuff that's happening right here in your backyard with your neighbor. Work that angle. And I believe that there are good people in all the places. And if we would all just lift a little bit, it could get done. But we have to do it on a daily basis. And we have to decide that we're committed. And we have to maybe even talk to our friends and neighbors and say, you're doing super good ally stuff. Way to go. Not seeing color. Let's take it another step. Let's take it one more step. And so that we can move forward.
I'm going to change direction here a little bit. I love what you're saying about systemic racism, where we have to go and stop the snowball. But where I have problems is with words. Because Candy and I are both teaching, not teaching, we have these discussions on racial awareness, racial unity. And we've talked about reparations, we've talked about anti-racism, all these kinds of things. We've talked about microaggressions. And the the blowback I get, I'm just thinking, I winced when you said that the interchange you had on email with the guy who said powwow, and he might be the most well-meaning person. I think we could say things to people and educate them really gently, but not write them off when
Right,
they do
right.
that,
That's
because they really, they want to do better, and then, but sometimes then they get really turned up. We have people in my building, I live in a condo, and it's like a small town, right?
Right, right.
So they are, and a couple of them are really, really racist. They say racist things, and I know they're the nicest people in the world, and they're that's not where their heart is, but they have to be educated about those things. As soon as I said something like, it's not called master bedroom anymore, I know exactly, I would get like, I'd be the laugh of the whole, they would absolutely cancel me. I would be canceled by saying, by telling them. And all these things are absolutely right with the words. But another thing is, you said being up to date with the language and what people want it to be called. With African Americans, and I'm saying African Americans because I was saying people of color, which I really thought was the most respectful thing. It's more encompassing and inclusive. And then somebody in our group who is from San Salvador said, "I can't stand being called people of color. That's wrong." And so then you get all self-conscious about what words you're using, when the words are maybe the least important thing. You know what I'm saying?
Right, and I think that part of what happens when we're correcting somebody else, that in that moment we're not correcting with love. The problem isn't their lack of love; it's our lack of love, because we're sitting in a place of judgment. We're like, oh, that idiot, that racist, such and such, right?
Exactly.
That's not a place. We're not moving from a place of love. If that's in your body. That's not the right time. You're not the right person to deliver that message, right? So that if you're able to say, like, I'm going to move in love, and I know this sounds hokey, but I know that love is the answer. Dang it! If we can move in love and say, and that's why I never just call people racist or not. Because it's not helpful. No one wants to hear that. No one. If I say, "Oh, you're racist," then you're already irritated with me. Right? Why am I bringing that up? Right?
Say it like, congratulations, you're racist.
I remember one time, my brother is, he's like really good with the humans, and so somebody had told him kind of a racist joke, and then he said, "Oh, you're racist." He's like, "I didn't know." The guy goes, "What? What?" He's like, "Oh, no. It's just like, I know now. All right, keep going with your joke. Keep going." I've tried that. I can't sell it. He can sell it, and so I think part of it is also knowing where your talents are, where you can be, and so that he was able to make that happen, and bring into the conversation something that hadn't been there before. I like Barack Obama's answer when somebody had asked him, "Well, do you think that this person, if they say that they're racist?" He said, "Well, I don't think that's really that useful, but I do think it's helpful to say, when you say that, I think that you're not taking into consideration this history,
Right.
which is very gentle, right? When I'm on Facebook and people say like irritating things, I don't just put it right there in the comment. That's not nice. No one's going to respond to that. That never changed the world. A Facebook comment. But I have slipped in someone's DMs and said, I saw this post of yours, and I know you, and I know that it's not likely that you want to be insensitive. And so you may not be aware of how this could be hurting some people. And that work so much better.
I have a question for you about self-education. I am very clearly a white woman who does not know as much as I feel like I should know, but I also don't want to utilize persons of color as my source of education.
See, you already know something right now.
That's right.
I know it's emotional labor, and I know it's
Right.
you know our job is to be the platform for your voices rather than the other way around. What kind of resources, like this is amazing. Reno, I'm so glad to see that Reno is kind of getting up with the times. But what resources do you recommend for educating ourselves without pushing that labor onto other marginalized
Sure.
groups?
Go to the places that teachers go.
Yeah.
So, for instance, Coretta Scott King has like a whole series of like book awards that are given from her organization. Just go check out what books she's recommending and read those books. Glisten, GLSEN, is a website for teachers who want to know how to better work with LGBTQ students. They have loads of information and resources. Go to the American Library Association. Those librarians,
Yeah, cool.
they're going to save the world.
Yes, they are.
Hit yourself to a librarian.
That's right.
They know things, and they know books.
I'm in librarian school.
Yes. The librarians are getting it done. We're tired. You're tired. You're like, I don't want to be pulling books off my shelf. But the librarians know how to pull books onto the shelf. They've got tons of different kinds of lists, different kind of categories. But there are all kinds of lists out there. This is Googleable.
Yes. Good word.
I almost said it right.
Good word.
Super close. What's really beautiful is like it's appropriate to say, I don't even know where to look. Oh, but then I can put that in and say top 10 books on social justice or books about anti-racism. I mean, even Amazon
Oh,
could be helpful. Dang it.
dang it.
Thank you.
Just going back to the point about breaking the momentum and like, so recently I had the privilege to kind of see the last state legislator at work, and also paying attention to what's trying to be done quietly, being very aware of what the people in power are passing.
Yes.
Because I do think it is not made for the working class, much less anybody that's been historically marginalized.
Yes.
But I think when you were talking about parents that are calling into school boards and action that is doable for somebody in the working class, and also calling your elected representatives and reminding them that you gave them that job.
Right.
Yes.
You could take it away. And so there are, the ACLU does it, I think the Human Rights Campaign does it. They will send out text messages like, hey, you should contact your elected official about this situation. Like, oh, excellent, I will get right on that. And so you can use your smartphone for something smart and have it alert you. There are organizations that want to inform you about how to contact your legislators, and so that you could put those alerts on your phone.
I just wanted to piggyback and add what I've appreciated, some of the allyism and support that I've had was supporting movements and intertwining their natural life. So for my white friends, they are not, a lot of them that I admire, are not just doing these non-racist things, but they are being anti-racist by intertwining these activities into their natural lifestyle.
Right, so you can go into their homes and you see books about Black people,
Yes.
written by Black people, that they're reading to their children. You're like, oh, like this is, like, good things are happening here.
Actively changing the institutions they support,
Mhm.
actively changing their circles, their friend groups, and making that a natural lifestyle as opposed to work that they're doing.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, so how diversified is your social media feed,
yes.
right? You know, if you're only following white people on Instagram, there are other people out there that are doing. Muslim Girl is one of my favorite Instagram pages. It's so fabulous, and you know, I don't know enough Muslims to be able to, you know, understand some of the things that they're going through, and that is just like an easy place to get information.
And then lastly, I just want to mention that's what our organization does. One of the things that I love so much is because it's diverse, and we're putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak. And as an activist and an advocate in the community, I always appreciate and ask that others support the activities when they do see those activities happening, instead of saying, hey, I'm too busy, I gotta work, I got kids to feed, so do they, so
Right.
does everyone.
Right.
So without others, as we talk about empowering, we need the support of our allies, of our neighbors, actively.
Right.
So I just ask on that behalf that we actively support these movements that take place.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
So going off like supporting and attending these events, right? Because I've always taken the back seat. I always want to give the marginalized individuals. They should be on the stage. You should be on the stage, right?
I should always be on the stage.
Amen, sister. Amen.
But you're saying that I should still be attending these events. I still need to be showing up and having my signs and
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
to educational events and everything like that.
Yeah, like it's okay for white people to show up to Juneteenth events.
Yes.
It's okay for white people to show up to a powwow. You're not going to be asked to organize it. But it's okay to show up,
Yes.
spend some money in the community,
Yes.
make a friend, find out some things. That's perfectly a legit thing to do. People of color showing up to your events all the time.
That's right.
And some reciprocity would be awesome.
Really.
How can we support reparations?
I think that right now we need to keep the conversation
Yes.
alive, and we have to say, for our elected officials, like, this is something that matters to us, right? And right now, I think one of the frustrating things for me is how much money we're putting into a military to be able to wage wars against brown people on the backs of brown people who are the ones enlisting in the military. I mean, I know that's a lot of broad generalizations I just painted there,
Yes.
but I'm going to stand by it.
There you go.
We're willingly putting that money in there. And we're not saying, take maybe 4 less jets this year, and maybe some reparations, or actually pay teachers a salary.
Yes.
You know, we don't lack money. We lack the will. And we are not putting pressure on people to do what's right. And so there's no need for them to do what's right. And so what I think that what I strive to do, and I'm not always good at it, is to say, this is my problem too, you know? And you say, well, you know, we can say, well, Donald Trump, blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently I had a part in electing him. I mean, I didn't vote for him. But maybe I didn't do enough to make sure other people didn't vote for him.
Yes.
You know, so that I have to own part of what's going on. And if I'm not willing to own it, then I'm not willing to get in and disrupt things.
what you were saying about being present at Juneteenth, going to a powwow, etc. It's something I deal with, and sometimes a little discomforting. Where is that line, and how do you know when it's being crossed between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation?
Yes.
We had this conversation in the car on the way here from the Nugget. We solved it in that amount of time. It's solvable. So cultural appropriation is when we want to take on the aspects of a culture, but we don't want to take on the pain of the culture, right? Like I wanna do hip hop, but I don't want to help hip hop. You know what I mean? And so, I think that for Indigenous peoples, there's a lot of talk about things that are Native inspired that can get into some appropriation, which is different than purchasing things from inspired natives. And so, if I'm purchasing from a Native artist, from a Black artist, then I'm putting money into that pocket, right? I shouldn't show up to a powwow and think I'm gonna dance, right? But I can listen to the drums, I can see what's going on, I can eat some food, buy a necklace, whatever, right? And so that part of it is understanding that I'm gonna be in a space, but just because I'm here doesn't mean that all the things that are happening here are for me. And I think that goes with what you're saying too, is saying, well, maybe I should just not show up. Like, no, you can show up, but just also understand that like you're not in charge of anything.
But even, I've had experiences at gatherings where people show up and want to buy something and then have no interest in learning about it or anything that has to do with it. And even friends of mine who have been working, selling, and vending, and they're like, well, yeah, this is a beautiful piece, and this means this, and they're like, oh, thank you.
Right. I mean, I don't know that we can really do much about that.
That's their right.
Right. I mean, they get to be ding dongs.
Right.
Those are the people I want to reach.
Well,
Don't call
I'm
them
glad
ding
that you
dongs.
want to take that up.
So
But it's a hard nut.
It is.
do you think that diminishes the seller, the artist or the craft? Is that what bothers you?
No,
about
what
it?
bothers me is that a lot of these people have been known to take that thing and then mock it or be derisive in how they use that item.
Well, I think part of it has to do with understanding the cultural, maybe even religious significance of things for other people. I mean, this is where it is really problematic for just anybody to put a headdress on, right? And because it has ceremonial, religious, spiritual significance, and it can be seen as in itself a living entity that just it's not for decoration, right? People can understand that who aren't from other cultures if they've got this is where like going to church is actually useful, because they can understand that we wouldn't take their religious symbols and then do weird things with them, right? They understand that and say, well then don't do that with other people. And they're like, oh, all right. But again, they have to have that explained to them.
Yeah.
Because I think that we don't understand. We don't understand the nature of, the ins and outs of other religions, other cultures, to understand like why something has a particular meaning, and then if I treat it in a particular way, how that is disrespectful.
First, I do want to do a shameless invite to Unitarian Universalist. A very open, non-religious, about policy, about doing the right thing, being a good person, and community, which is what we do.
Yes.
So, shameless invite, check it out. I'm there all the time.
Nice.
And then,
That's my church.
I'm not surprised. I just wanted to make note of things that I've noticed in the community domestic violence.
Yep.
And the residents of the area are fighting it.
Yes.
There's gonna be a
Of course
question in
they are.
August about it, and I think that's something we should show up to support. As well as, I'm looking for a job, so I'm on the job hunt, and I noticed a canvassing job, a political canvassing job. It is $800 every week, it's not bad. I applied, right, go through it. What they want is someone very conservative for this job, which is this ball rolling down
Yes.
of white supremacy. It's good paying. It's not bad, but you don't see that for the Democratic Party. You don't see that for any other party. You see it for the Conservative Party.
Yep.
And that is one of those things that, like, part of me wants everybody that isn't conservative to apply, like say they are, and take the money. If we're gonna have to fight somebody, we have to fight their ways. And so, I don't know, small things like that, and I do believe cancel culture is real, and I do believe that we make most of our vote with our dollar. And if we started really picking places that are doing the wrong things and actually boycotting them and really not spending our money there,
Yep.
I think our voices will be heard. And I think we'll be able to fight a lot harder and then start picking each one. I mean, a lot of these positions, I think CEO of most places, we can knock their salary in half, and a lot of people will be willing to do what they're doing. So I think a lot of positions and a lot of places are like that. Someone high up's making a lot of money, they don't really necessarily need on the backs of other people. And if we're able to cancel that and lower these entitled positions, I know people would be willing to do them.
Right. I think one of the things is like an unpaid internship, so that I'm also a filmmaker, and it would be relatively easy to go to the local universities and get unpaid interns to work on the film. But I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right. And it only serves, we start imagining who could work for free.
That law changed. They have to get credit because they were taking advantage of the interns so much, not paying them.
Right.
So the law changed that you give that person college credit or you pay them.
Right, but even then, some of the college credit was not sufficient. It didn't really balance out for the work that people are doing, right? And so that we have to look at the kinds of things that are in place to say, okay, who does that serve? And who gets hurt by that? Who actually pays that price? So if we don't have, we in the film industry, we see, oh, there aren't maybe a lot of Black, Latinx, Asian people making films, Indigenous people making films. Well, right, because they couldn't afford the free internship, right? They had to work. And so then that pipeline gets altered by something that seems like not a big deal, but then it ends up being a pretty big deal for providing access for some people and denying access for others. But we have to be willing to say, well, I'm gonna write that check then. I'm gonna make that happen. Because it's the right thing to do, and it is at least like another little drop in that bucket to try to push white supremacy back. How are we doing?
I
So
also just want to add, if anybody has resources, like attorneys that work pro bono, refer them. ACLU does a lot of work for activists who go out on the front lines and fight some of these issues that happen. But what's also helpful is if people in the community have resources or expertise that they can donate parts of their time, pieces of their time, to help these groups that are nonprofit and out here, going out on the field, on the front line after work and with kids. It's really helpful. Like the local NAACP, which is working to thrive together, but we could really use the support of local attorneys.
if you know how to write a grant, like just
working.
I can write a grant. You get
Yes.
whatever those
Anyway.
skills that you have.
Any way you can contribute to the organizations or help.
So I have comment you on a few things. The parenting you brought up, dealing with the youth, the words. Well, my son came home in high school and started using things like hearing things because it wasn't at my house. The blonde jokes, the Polak jokes, the Jewish jokes, the Mexican jokes. I said, don't buy into that. So it was that struggle when you were saying before, trying to be the parent, and I'm fighting against all the peer pressure. But I said, just walk away, have something else to do. Hey, see you guys, move away. But don't buy into that.
Right.
You know, and that's, we still have all those inappropriateness, Foxy, that you were saying before.
Yeah, and I've been in positions where I've been in, you know, where I'm out in the world and things are happening, and I'm just like, that's homophobic, but I'm late for a meeting and I can't take it on right now.
Yeah.
But then I've been in a situation where homophobia like showed up in my house.
Right.
I'll cancel all the meetings for that. Right, and so so that I confronted a person and said, we don't talk like that in my house.
Mike and I were talking. We just met. We were talking about it's easier to hate. It's just easier to have hate speech and join in on that than it is to make an effort to like or engage or appreciate.
Right.
It's just easier.
It is, and I think I'll wrap things up with this idea. We often think that the opposite of love is hate. But the opposite of love is fear. And so that when we see behaviors of people, when we see hate speech or we see things happening, that if we understand that something is frightening that person, they're afraid of something. And if we could get in and understand the fear and help assuage the fear, then we're able to do something. And that's very different, right? It feels more doable to take on fear that somebody has than to take on their hate. And so think about that as a practice too. What is Ron DeSantis afraid of?
Disney moving.
He's not afraid enough of that. So we have to understand, like, what's the fear? So moms are afraid that their kids are going to read things about black people and then feel bad about themselves. In the history of all children, that has never happened.
That's right.
But we have this fear around it. And so rather than talk to that person as hateful, bigoted, stupid, whatever, say, oh, you're afraid. Let's talk about this fear. And not talk about why this fear is your kids are gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. One of my sons liked to wear a kilt to school. It was good. And so he'd just show up to school in a kilt and a t-shirt, some tennis shoes, just walking down the hall. And some kids started making fun of him because he's essentially wearing a skirt to school. And my son turned around to them and said, "It's okay. It's just a kilt. You're going to be okay." So let's just do that. Thanks.
So the reason that Roni Jo is in town this weekend is it's our 40th high school reunion this weekend for Sparks High School, and Roni was one of my favorite people in school, and I had forgotten why. But thank you so much for coming and bringing all this inspiration. Can we have another round of applause? And also for her dad for helping contribute to this. And it's lovely to see you. And as Adrienne said, and thank you for your beautiful words at the beginning, Adrienne, Northern Nevada Marches Forward started in 2017 to put on the Reno Women's March. We did that for many years. We decided to become an official nonprofit organization in 2021 because we needed to do this more than once a year. And we were talking about very, very important things for 3 minutes each once a year. And so we formed the organization so that we could talk about these all the time, but we need help, just like anybody else does. So if you're interested in helping, and you don't have to define what that means right now. These cards are at that back table. You can go look at our website. One of the things you can do is say, what else should we be talking about? Our board is very intentionally diverse because I don't know what you know, and I don't know what Yolanda knows. And I don't know what any of you know. So bring your ideas, go on, fill out a form and tell us what we should be talking about. If you're interested in volunteering board positions, let us know. And then I am going to do a shameless plug because you brought up filmmaking. I'm also on the board of Cordillera International Film Festival, which is coming up at the end of July in Reno, Nevada, well, Sparks, Nevada, and Legends. All kinds of diverse programming. There's social justice, there's LGBTQIA. There's African. They call it African American on there. I don't think we're supposed to be saying that anymore. That's one of the words.
Depends on who you ask.
So there's all kinds of diverse programming. So if you're interested, you can just go to one show or you can go to the whole thing. But there's all kinds of really amazing programs. And Juneteenth is one of my favorite events, and my other favorite event is Pride, which is coming up next week. And again, go places where you're not comfortable and learn. It's a lot of fun. So thank you very much. The person looking for a job, come talk to me afterward. And thank you again, Ronnie, and thank you all for spending your Tuesday night here. And thank you, big thanks to, is it Thursday? And thank you to Alex of Coffee and Comics for staying open late for us. We really appreciate it. Have a nice night. Go out and make a difference.